He married a stranger out of necessity. But when the worst storm in decades trapped them together, he discovered the woman he almost ignored could be the one who saved him. This is a story of second chances written in snow and firelight. The winter of 1885 brought a storm no one expected. It came without warning, swallowing the prairie in minutes. The train tracks vanished beneath white fury. The world turned into screaming wind and blinding snow, as if nature wanted to erase everything human from the land. Caleb Hart stood inside the tiny train station, snow melting from his heavy coat. His chest felt tight with a thought he couldn't shake: I married the wrong person. The station was barely big enough for 10 people. Its wooden walls groaned with every wind blast. Snow forced itself through gaps in the windows, turning the air cold and damp. Each gust hit the building like fists pounding on a door that refused to open. Caleb stayed near the entrance. He stood tall and stiff, his hands opening and closing inside his gloves. He kept his coat buttoned tight, as though being ready to leave might somehow change what he'd already done. Across the small room sat his new wife. She rested on an old wooden bench, worn smooth by countless travelers. Her hands lay folded in her lap, fingers pressed together so hard her knuckles had turned white. Her dress was neat but worn thin in places. Someone had carefully stitched the elbows where the fabric had torn. Her boots showed years of use, the kind that belonged to someone who walked everywhere because riding was a luxury she'd never known. She lifted her eyes toward him once. Just a brief glance. Then she looked down again, like she already understood what his face would show her. Caleb forced himself to swallow. This wasn't how he'd imagined things would go. He'd thought meeting her would bring clarity, that rightness would settle into his bones the moment they stood together. Instead, something heavy pressed against his chest, a truth he didn't want to face. Their marriage had been arranged for practical reasons. Nothing more. His ranch needed someone to manage the household, to cook meals, to bring order to a life built on harsh land and endless winters. No one had promised love would grow. Still, he hadn't expected to feel this hollow. The station door exploded inward, slamming against the wall so hard the stove rattled. The station master stumbled inside, his beard crusted with ice, gasping for breath. "That's all she wrote," he announced grimly. "Tracks are buried. Roads too. No trains moving tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. You'll be lucky to see your hand in front of your face out there." The door crashed shut again. The wind outside screamed like an angry beast. Just like that, everything changed. Two people who barely knew each other, bound by marriage papers, now trapped by forces beyond anyone's control. She pulled her thin shawl tighter around herself. It did almost nothing against the cold creeping through the walls. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask for anything. She simply endured. Time crawled forward. Maybe minutes passed. Maybe longer. "I can help," she finally said. Her voice came out soft but steady. "If something needs to be done, I can do it." Caleb's first feeling was irritation. Not at her. At himself. At the way her quiet offer made him feel exposed, like she could see his guilt. "There's nothing to do," he said shortly. He saw her flinch at his tone. He let out a long breath. "We just have to wait," he added more gently. She nodded immediately. No argument. No hurt feelings showing on her face. As if waiting was something she'd spent her whole life learning how to do. The stove glowed weakly in the corner. Caleb added more wood to it, his movements practiced and efficient. Cold didn't frighten him. He'd survived winters worse than this one. What bothered him was the way she watched the fire. Not casually, but with complete attention, as though warmth was something precious that might vanish if she looked away. Hours dragged past. Hunger began to gnaw at them both. The station master shared what little food he had stored away, then disappeared into the back room. Soon it was just the two of them again, alone with the storm's endless howling. She stood up slowly from the bench. "I could prepare something warm," she offered quietly. "If you'd like." Caleb hesitated, then nodded. She worked in silence, her movements careful and deliberate. She used the scraps of food like they mattered, like nothing should be wasted. Her hands shook slightly. Not from clumsiness. From nervousness. When she handed him the bowl, she kept her eyes down, as if bracing herself for criticism. Caleb took it. The food was plain, nothing special. But it was warm. And something inside him shifted, just a little. Like ice beginning to crack beneath someone's feet. "Did you grow up on the frontier?" he asked. The question surprised them both. She nodded. "My family never had much. I learned young how to make do." The word endure hung in the air between them. Sleep came in broken pieces that night. Every time the wind slammed against the walls, she jolted awake, her fingers clutching her shawl like someone might steal it. From his spot near the stove, Caleb watched. He noticed how she shivered even when the fire burned hot. How she sat straight despite her exhaustion, as if relaxing might be seen as weakness. "You should sleep closer to the heat," he finally said. She looked up quickly, surprised. "I don't want to take your place," she protested quietly. "It's warm here," he replied. "You need it more than I do." She moved carefully toward the stove, settling near the fire without getting close to him. Like a careful animal testing new territory. After midnight, the storm grew worse. The station master burst in again, fear sharp in his voice. "Snow's burying the doors," he said. "If this keeps up, we'll have to ration heat carefully. We could be stuck here for days." Her hands clenched into fists. "I don't handle being unwanted very well," she whispered. The words hit Caleb harder than any accusation could have. He turned to face her fully. "I never said you were unwanted." "You didn't have to say it," she replied softly. Silence filled the space between them. "I made my choice with my head," Caleb admitted. "Not with my heart. But that doesn't make you a mistake." She looked up at him, stunned. "It makes me the one who got it wrong," he continued. The wind slammed into the window so hard she gasped. Her hand lifted instinctively, then froze, embarrassed by her own fear. Without thinking, Caleb stepped closer. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Slowly. Carefully. "You're safe," he said quietly. "As long as I'm here, you're safe." Her breath caught in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat close after that, though not touching. They shared warmth by choice, not by accident. Outside, the blizzard raged on without mercy. And somewhere in that endless night, Caleb realized something that frightened him more than the storm ever could. He no longer regretted being trapped here. He only regretted how easily he'd almost overlooked the person sitting beside him. Morning didn't arrive with sunlight. It arrived with silence. The kind of silence so complete it felt unnatural. Like the world had been screaming all night and now needed to catch its breath. Caleb woke before he meant to. His muscles ached. His senses stayed alert, waiting for another violent blast of wind. But none came. The blizzard had finally worn itself out. Gray light filtered weakly through snow-covered windows. The damage became clear. Snow pressed shoulder-high against the walls outside. The door was completely sealed, buried as if the building had been swallowed by the earth itself. And leaning against his shoulder, asleep for the first time since they'd arrived, his wife didn't stir. Caleb froze. Sometime during the night, exhaustion had finally claimed her. She'd slumped sideways, her head resting lightly against him. One hand curled unconsciously in the fabric of his coat, as if even in sleep she feared warmth might disappear. He didn't move. Not when his arm went numb. Not when the fire dimmed. Not even when the cold started creeping back in. Because for the first time since meeting her, she looked peaceful. When she finally woke, she jerked upright immediately, mortified. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't do anything wrong," Caleb interrupted gently. She paused, studying his face like she was checking for a trick. Then her shoulders relaxed, just a little. Relief, quiet but real. The station master emerged from the back room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Storm's past," he announced. "But don't get your hopes up. Roads are buried deep. Tracks too. Could be another full day. Maybe two. Another day." Those words would have filled Caleb with dread yesterday. Now they felt like something else. Like time. Fragile, dangerous time. They rationed what little food remained. Caleb pushed more onto her plate without saying anything. She noticed anyway. "You'll need your strength," she protested softly. "So will you," he replied. Then added awkwardly, "and I'm bigger." The corner of her mouth twitched. It was the first hint of a smile he'd seen from her. To stay warm, they worked. Snow had forced its way through cracks in the walls overnight. Caleb shoveled it out with his bare hands, his breath fogging the frozen air. She found a torn blanket in a forgotten drawer and began mending it with needle and thread. Her fingers moved quickly, practiced. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Survival has a way of stripping conversation down to what actually matters. Their movements began to align without discussion. He cleared space. She sealed drafts. He stacked wood. She repaired cloth. Partners before either of them dared name it that way. By midday, the wind returned. Not with the same fury as before, but enough to remind them the storm wasn't finished yet. The building shuddered. A sharp crack echoed through the room. A window pane split down the middle. Cold poured in like something alive and hungry. Without thinking, Caleb crossed the room and braced the broken window with his body while she scrambled for boards to seal it. Her shawl slipped off. Her hair tumbled loose as she worked. "Hold it there," she said breathlessly. "I am. You're bleeding." He glanced down. A thin line of red traced across his knuckles where the glass had cut him. "I'll live," he said. She huffed softly. "You frontier men and your confidence while bleeding." Despite himself, Caleb smiled. They sealed the gap together, their fingers numb from cold, their breath mingling in the frozen air. When the draft finally stopped, they stood close, chests heaving, faces flushed from cold and effort. "Thank you," she said, her eyes bright. "You're faster than you look," he replied. "And you're heavier," she said without thinking. Then froze. "I mean, because of the wind." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised them both. They returned to the stove, sitting closer now out of necessity. The quiet between them felt different. Not heavy anymore. Companionable. "I didn't expect you to be kind," she said suddenly. He frowned slightly. "Why not?" She shrugged, her gaze fixed on the fire. Men who choose wives out of necessity usually keep their distance. He considered that carefully. "I've kept distance most of my life," he admitted. "Because it felt safer. Because disappointment hurts." She looked at him then. Really looked. "You sound like someone who's been disappointed often." "Enough times," he said. Then after a pause, "By myself most of all." She nodded slowly. Recognition, not pity, crossed her face. The afternoon dragged on. Hunger pressed against them again. The station master shared grim news. Several settlements were cut off completely. People stranded across the region, all of them waiting on mercy from nature. As the light faded outside, they talked more. Small things at first. Weather. Land. Daily chores. Then larger truths began slipping through the cracks when neither of them guarded their words carefully enough. She spoke of her family. Of losing her mother when she was young. Of being told she was useful and practical, but never beautiful. Never chosen for herself. When she finished, she stared at the floor, braced for judgment. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "You've endured more than most people." "That doesn't make me special," she replied. "No," he said. "It makes you strong." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. Night fell again. The temperature dropped dangerously low. The stove struggled. Caleb fed it the last of the wood they had. They sat under the mended blanket together, their shoulders touching now. No apology. No explanation needed. Outside, the wind howled, but weaker than before. "I thought I'd ruined both our lives," Caleb said suddenly. She turned to him. "By marrying me?" "By choosing without care," he corrected. "By thinking survival was enough." "And now?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. Honesty mattered more than safety now. "Now I think survival is only the beginning." Her voice came out steady. "I never expected love. Only safety. Respect. You deserve more than what you expect," he said. The word surprised them both. Later, when sleep claimed them again, it came without fear. They lay back to back, warmth shared by agreement rather than accident. Caleb stared into the dark, listening to the storm soften, and understood something essential. Regret had been easy. It required nothing. But care required action. By morning, when the doors finally opened, Caleb knew he would no longer see her as a consequence of necessity. But as a choice. His choice. Morning arrived without drama. No wind. No howling. No violence. Just silence so deep it felt like the land itself was resting after a brutal fight. Caleb woke slowly, disoriented by the stillness. For days now, sound had meant danger. Wind meant cold. Noise meant threat. But now there was nothing. Only the faint crackle of dying embers and the soft rhythm of another person breathing nearby. He turned his head. She was awake, sitting close to the stove with her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was loosely braided over one shoulder, like she'd done it without thinking. The firelight painted her face in soft gold, smoothing away the sharp edges that hunger and fear had carved the night before. She looked steady. Not hopeful exactly. Not waiting for anything. Just present. "The storm's done," Caleb said quietly. His voice felt too loud in the stillness. She nodded. "I noticed." They shared a small smile. The kind that didn't need explanation. The station master emerged soon after, already pulling on his coat. "Road crews are working their way through," he announced. "Won't be quick, but you'll get out today. By midday if the weather holds." Caleb felt the words settle between them like something heavy. "You'll get out. Not will survive. Not you're stuck." This was different. This was ending. They packed slowly. Neither of them rushed. There was no urgency now, and somehow that made every movement feel heavier. The blanket she'd mended was folded carefully, her hands lingering on the fabric as if it held memory. Caleb shrugged into his coat, the same one she'd slept wrapped in, and hesitated before buttoning it. Outside, the world looked unreal. Snow stretched endlessly in all directions, smooth and untouched. Sunlight glinted off the drifts like shattered glass. The tracks were gone. The horizon was erased. The storm hadn't just passed. It had rewritten the land. She stepped outside beside him, her breath catching softly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Dangerous, he corrected out of habit. She glanced at him. Both things can be true. That gave him pause. The wagon arrived near midday, pulled by 2 exhausted horses. The driver was bundled against the cold. Caleb helped her up first, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders without thinking. She noticed. She didn't pull away. The ride to the ranch was long and quiet. The land bore scars everywhere, broken fences, half-buried markers, paths lost beneath snow. But it was familiar to him. Solid. Real. He found himself watching her instead of watching the horizon. She sat upright, her hands folded loosely now, her gaze steady as the miles passed. She looked different. Not stronger, she'd always been strong. But more certain. Like surviving the storm had proven something to herself she'd never been allowed to believe before. When the ranch finally came into view, she stiffened. The house stood against the white land like a promise made long ago and kept through hardship. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Proof of life. Warmth. Continuity. This is it, Caleb said. She nodded, swallowing. It's bigger than I imagined. So was the storm, he replied gently. Inside, the house was cold but intact. Caleb set about building a fire while she lingered in the doorway, uncertain now that the rules of survival no longer erased expectation. This wasn't a station. This was a home. His home. And maybe, if she chose, hers too. When the fire finally caught and warmth crept back into the room, Caleb turned to her fully for the first time since they'd arrived. Not guarded. Not defensive. I owe you more than an apology, he said. She waited. She didn't interrupt. She didn't brace herself. I brought you into this thinking only of what I needed. The storm showed me what I almost threw away. Her eyes searched his face, wary but open. I don't need promises, she said quietly. I've lived on less. I know, he replied. That's why I won't give you empty ones. He took a breath. The hardest part came next. You can leave. The words hung between them, heavy and deliberate. When the road's clear fully, I'll help you go anywhere you choose. Or you can stay. Not because you were chosen out of necessity. But because I'm choosing you now. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from fear this time. Relief. I was afraid, she admitted, her voice unsteady, that once the storm ended, everything good would end with it. He shook his head. The storm didn't create what happened between us. It revealed it. She stepped closer. Hesitant at first, then braver. If I stay, she said, I won't be quiet. I won't shrink myself to fit what you expect. A corner of his mouth lifted. I don't want quiet. I want honest. And I don't want you smaller. I want you here. She nodded slowly, the decision settling into her bones. Then I'll stay. The days that followed were not perfect. There were awkward moments. Questions about who slept where, who cooked what. Silences that needed time rather than words. Caleb learned she talked to herself while working. She learned he forgot meals when focused on a task. Once, she burned the bread. He ate it anyway. Is it terrible? She asked, watching him carefully. He chewed thoughtfully. I've had worse. She raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the question. He smiled. Then yes. But I'll survive. She laughed. A real laugh, soft and surprised, like she hadn't expected it from herself. Winter loosened its grip inch by inch. Snow melted. Fences were rebuilt. Chores became routines. Routines became shared. One evening, as they stood watching the sun dip low over land once buried in white, she spoke quietly. Do you still regret choosing me? He didn't hesitate. No. I regret not seeing you sooner. She smiled fully then, without reservation. The storm of 1885 became more than survival. It became the turning point of two lives that had nearly passed each other by unnoticed. And if this story left you feeling something, warmth, hope, connection, stay with us. Stories like these don't rush love. They let it earn its place, one choice at a time.